Wow, Chapter 52 was intense. Da Shu handled Niu Wei's arrival brilliantly. The fake wait time, the controlled camp, pure strategy. I loved seeing his experience shine. Meanwhile, the MC is founding another commandery and discovers a wine-making tribe. The potential for that alone is huge, especially with his immediate plans for juke experimentation. But the real game changer? Setting up the Jinwuwei. The MC isn't just building a nation. He's building an intelligence network to infiltrate the Xin Tribe, even planning long-term economic assimilation. That level of foresight is just staggering, seeing him casually use sugar and tea diplomacy with Niu Wei, knowing the deeper plays involving scales, currency, and secret agents. Absolutely masterful. This whole exchange feels like the start of a complex, high-stakes relationship. Will trade truly lead to peace and assimilation, or is this just the beginning of a covert war fought with spies and economic leverage? I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to see how the Jinwuwei mission unfolds. Negotiations couldn't possibly be concluded in a single session. The main points agreed upon during the first day were the rules of trade and the scope of the exchange. Chief Han, we are truly in need of vehicles. Any kind of vehicle will do. Whatever price you sell them to the grasslanders for, we can pay. The same or even a little more, Niu Wei pleaded eagerly. As for other goods, because we aren't yet familiar with the Han tribe, we hope Chief Han might permit us to walk around here, or perhaps visit other commanderies of the Han tribe, to see what commodities you have that we might need. Only then can we provide Chief Han with a definite list of goods. You didn't answer immediately, adopting a thoughtful facade. In truth, you had already decided what to do. Tap, tap, tap. Your fingers drummed on the tabletop as if you were deep in consideration. Vehicles can be traded. They will be the same as those sold to the grasslanders, just the bare chassis. You will have to provide your own oxen and horses. Payment will also be made in oxen and horses. After a moment's thought, you decided to stick with payment in livestock for the time being. Cattle and horses were crucial for the Han tribe's expansion and development, but promoting the currency among the Xin tribe wasn't yet practical. Firstly, the current quantity of currency was insufficient to support such large-scale trade. Secondly, without a network of banks or traditional money houses, circulation would be inconvenient. To promote Han tribe currency on the grasslands and among the Xin tribe, a city would need to be established on the grasslands first, with a bank set up there. This would take at least 2 or 3 years to achieve. As for your request to look around, for now, I can permit you free movement within Liuyang Commandery. However, you may not enter the workshops or government offices without prior notification. You are also forbidden from trespassing into the homes of Han tribe citizens. Nor can you stay overnight within the city walls. Violators will be arrested, according to Han tribe law, with severe offenses punishable by death. As for other commanderies, perhaps after some time, depending on your conduct. After a brief pause, having carefully considered, you announced your decision, which of course had been prepared in advance. Letting them stay in Liuyang Commandery for a while served the primary purpose of giving them ample time and opportunity to interact with the Jinwu Guard members. The goal was to leave Niu Wei with the impression that these were valuable talents ripe for recruitment, paving the way for future undercover infiltration. Allowing them into other commanderies was out of the question for now. That would require prior arrangements on your part. However, Niu Wei was oblivious to these plans. Hearing that you permitted them to move about Liuyang Commandery, with the possibility of visiting other commanderies later, he was overjoyed. He quickly rose from his seat, hurried to the center of the main hall, and bowed in gratitude. Thank you, Chief Han, for your graciousness. Niu Wei will strictly restrain his subordinates and ensure they do not violate the rules of the Han tribe. All right, that's all for today. You may leave now. You can take the brown sugar with you. Someone, wrap it up for him in paper, you said, waving dismissively, ready for him to go. Having achieved his initial objective, Niu Wei was delighted. His mind was now entirely preoccupied with the thought of exploring the city. He quickly took his leave, picked up the brown sugar, wrapped in white paper by the clerk, and departed excitedly with his men. Just as he reached the doorway, he encountered the subordinate he had previously sent back to fetch the gifts. The man had returned carrying a small bag. "Chief, Elder Niu of the Xin Tribe has returned. He says he has brought the gift he retrieved earlier and wishes to present it to you personally," the clerk at the door reported again. "Oh, I almost forgot. Let him in." Shortly after, Niu Wei re-entered, the main hall having removed his shoes. He carried an animal skin bag, which wasn't large but was stuffed full. A clerk had already approached with a tray, indicating for Niu Wei to empty the gift onto it. Although Niu Wei had requested to present the gift personally, he lacked the status for close contact with you. Presenting it via an intermediary was safer. Even if you yourself were unafraid of danger, your safety was tied to that of the entire Han tribe, and Da Shu dared not be careless. The contents of the bag clattered onto the tray. A glance told you what they were: pearls and conch shells. These items were indeed rare within the Han tribe, but for the Xin tribe, who lived on islands and frequently produced salt by evaporating seawater, such things, while uncommon, were not unobtainable. "Chief Han, these are treasures our tribe has gathered from the Great Sea. This is a conch. It can produce a very loud sound. These beads were dug out from the flesh of certain shellfish. We call them luogu, conch bones, in our homeland. They can be used for decoration," Niu Wei explained as the clerk brought the tray before you. "Conch bones? Seriously, how ignorant, you thought privately. They probably saw that clamshells didn't have bones inside, and thus mistook the pearls within the flesh for bones, hence the name." You mused silently. But speaking of the pearls, whether Niu Wei had intentionally selected them or not, they were remarkably large, though not all perfectly round and smooth. The smallest had a diameter of over 1.5 centimeters, even a size larger than the glass marbles you played with as a child, while the largest reached 2 centimeters in diameter. There were several hundred of them. In your past life, they would have been extremely valuable. Could it be that pearls grew so large in the environment of this era? As for how to use them? Pick out some for Xiaodi and Zhan Ying, and keep the rest to reward subordinates. At the very least, they were. Tribute, these items are acceptable, you said, picking up a handful of pearls and toying with them. However, these aren't conch bones. They are called pearls. They are harvested from a type of shellfish called a bang, oyster, or clam. Its outer shell is the bone, so to speak, not the pearl. Not every bang contains one, but they aren't exceptionally rare either. Furthermore, these shellfish can be artificially cultivated, and so can the pearls inside. It's as simple as raising pigs or sheep. Upon hearing the translation, everyone present showed some surprise, especially Niu Wei, the one presenting the gift, who was utterly astonished. How did the Han chief know this, and in such detail? Could it be they also had pearls here? But no, that wasn't right. Weren't pearls only found in the sea? Could they grow in fresh water too? And they could be artificially cultivated? How? The Xin tribe had gathered so many pearls, yet they never knew these things could be farmed. The clerks nearby, naturally, were once again filled with admiration for their leader's vast knowledge. He could speak authoritatively about any curiosity. Da Shu, however, was different. After a brief flicker of initial surprise, he remained perfectly composed where he sat. He had grown accustomed to the leader's exceptional nature. He would only have found it strange if you hadn't recognized them. This display of knowledge was entirely normal for you. Observing the reactions in the hall, Niu Wei drew his own conclusions. The Han chief had not only seen pearls before, but spoke about them with authority, even knowing about pearl cultivation techniques unfamiliar to the Xin tribe. The governor of Liuyang Commandery remained completely unfazed, showing no surprise at all, suggesting he was likely familiar with them too. The astonishment of the remaining clerks was probably due to their lower rank. It was normal not to know as much as the leaders, although Niu Wei desperately wanted to ask how pearls were cultivated. He ultimately didn't dare. This was clearly a valuable technique, one that no tribe would easily reveal. Anyone who did would surely be a fool. Therefore, after taking his leave once more, Niu Wei led his subordinates to the market. It was still morning, and the market had not yet dispersed. Quite a few people were still there, milling about and chatting idly. Niu Wei hadn't brought all his men. There were 100 of them, after all. Moving around in such a large group might make people think they were looking for trouble. So, he only brought the few subordinates who had been with him earlier, along with a clerk who had been acting as their translator these past few days. Now, this clerk served as both their pass for entering and exiting the city and their guide, as well as Niu Wei's Han language teacher. The market wasn't located within the city walls, but on the wide streets connecting several districts. Liuyang Commandery currently consisted of 6 earth-walled enclosures, essentially 6 distinct districts or wards. The original layout had been planned according to the scale of a capital city, leaving significant gaps between each district. Intended for future streets, these reserved roadways were generally about 100 meters wide, designed to accommodate lanes for vehicles, green belts, pedestrian walkways, and even space for shops, inns, and restaurants along the main thoroughfares. For now, however, there were only wide dirt paths, overgrown weeds, and stalls displaying all sorts of goods. Some vendors simply spread grass mats on the ground, displaying hand-woven straw sandals or cloth shoes made from old clothing. These cloth shoes were quite fashionable in the Han tribe. The style was the most common type, the traditional black cloth shoe design, an idea you had introduced, which Xiao Dai had taught many women how to make. When clothes became worn out, they might be patched and worn longer. If they were truly beyond repair, usable sections would be cut out and fashioned into cloth shoes, extending their usefulness for a while longer. "Sir?" Niu Wei asked the translating clerk curiously. "What are these shoes made of? The material doesn't look like animal hide." "It's just cloth, made from worn-out clothes," the clerk explained. "Most households make some for themselves. Since the Han tribe introduced currency this year, some people looking to earn money will collect finished shoes from households or gather old clothes to make shoes themselves. Then they sell them at the market, mainly to outsiders who come here for work or to families who have recently joined the Han tribe and don't have much cloth yet." "I see. So worn clothes can still be made into shoes. That avoids wasting materials." "What a good idea!" "Naturally. Not only do these cloth shoes save materials, but because they're made from old clothes, they're more comfortable. You haven't worn linen or hemp cloth, so you wouldn't know. Newly woven cloth is quite stiff. It only becomes soft and comfortable after being worn for a few months and washed several times. So, while new clothes look nice, they aren't as comfortable against the skin as old ones. It's the same with these shoes. Even though they're made from scraps, they don't chafe your feet at all. My whole family wears this kind." The clerk spoke enthusiastically, giving Niu Wei a thorough explanation. The chief had instructed that cloth could be sold to the Xin Tribe, and the more, the better. This was a significant source of income. With grain exports prohibited, cloth was the most important daily necessity. Everyone needed clothes, after all. "Are these cloth shoes really that good? I'd like to buy a few pairs, but what do we do if we don't have Han tribe money?" Niu Wei asked again. "The commandery governor has already addressed this. Your expenses will be covered by your horses. If you want to buy something, I can pay for you. We'll just add it to your account later," the clerk said readily. It wasn't his money, so he didn't mind at all. Niu Wei felt conflicted. Using horses to cover everything again. If they ran out of horses, how would they get back? What would they live on here in the Han tribe territory? They might end up staying for quite a long time. Thinking of this, he asked another question. "Well, sir, could we perhaps sell some things here to earn money? Or could my men find some work here, odd jobs, to earn a bit of money?" "Certainly," the clerk replied. "The commandery governor said selling goods and working are both permitted. However, you're not allowed to wander off freely. You can't hunt in the surrounding mountains or cut firewood. Basically, just don't roam around aimlessly. If you have goods you brought with you, you can sell them here, but no forced buying or selling is allowed. Really? That's wonderful. Then tomorrow I'll arrange for some of my men to start working. We'll have to trouble you, sir, to help find them jobs. For today, though, please just put it on our account. Could you trouble yourself to buy each of us a pair of these cloth shoes? Niu Wei sounded quite pleased. It sounded like a tough grind, but at least it was some income. Otherwise, he didn't know how long their 200-odd horses would last them. The clerk nodded and spoke with the shoe vendor. The vendor took out a measuring stick made of yellow bamboo slats, measured the length of Niu Wei and his men's feet, selected appropriately sized shoes, and the clerk paid. Niu Wei and his men changed into the new shoes right there. They felt light on their feet. The shoes were indeed comfortable. The soles were thick but soft, making walking easy on the feet, and the cloth uppers were breathable. Even though it was summer, their feet didn't feel hot. They continued strolling through the market. It was now mid-morning. The vendors selling sweet sorghum stalks were long gone. Those were too popular, usually selling out within half an hour of being brought ashore in the morning. However, there were plenty of other interesting things. Stalls selling novel snacks, others selling tables, chairs, and benches. There were brooms made of bamboo twigs, smaller brooms woven from sorghum stalks, various baskets, boxes, water buckets, carrying poles, single-wheeled hand carts, bamboo mats, grass mats, all sorts of things. Niu Wei and his men didn't need any of these items, so they didn't buy anything, but he had the clerk describe each one to satisfy their curiosity. The group walked and talked until lunchtime, eventually arriving at the food street. The aroma of various foods wafting through the air made Niu Wei and his companions stop in their tracks. "Sir, what is this? It looks so strange. Is this also food?" "That's right. This is something else our chief came up with recently. I heard a tribe called Zhan, from Liuyang Commandery to the west, recently joined us. This is made from the sticky rice they brought. This triangular thing wrapped in reed leaves is called ash water zongzi, sticky rice dumpling. It's made by burning rice straw to ash, mixing the ash with water, filtering it, and then soaking sticky rice in the lye water. Then it's wrapped in leaves and boiled. Once cooked, it's soaked in cool water. It's very refreshing to eat in the summer, has a firm texture, and is quite filling since it's made from grain. That one's relatively cheap. Then there's this." The clerk continued, pointing. "This is bamboo tube zongzi. It's also made with sticky rice, but doesn't need leaf wrapping. The rice is just cooked inside a bamboo tube. You can take the whole log-shaped dumpling out and drizzle it with honey. The taste is incredibly delicious, but it's also more expensive. One bamboo tube zongzi costs as much as 3 ash water zongzi." The clerk, who seemed quite the foodie, knew all about the various foods here, standing with Niu Wei and the others. Before the zongzi stall, he was practically drooling as he described them. Niu Wei noticed his craving. Frankly, it wasn't just the clerk. Looking at this unusually shaped food, Niu Wei felt a bit peckish himself. "Since you say this zong thing is so delicious, sir. Let's each have one. One of each type. You too, sir, just put it all on our account later," Niu Wei offered generously. "Eh? How could I possibly accept your food? Sir, it's all right. We don't mind." "All right. All right," the clerk cut in, seeming to relent quickly, perhaps afraid Niu Wei might change his mind. "Seeing as you're so insistent, I won't refuse your kind offer. You've come all this way to the Han tribe, and as your host, I naturally can't let you down." He turned to the vendor. "Young man, give each of us 1 ash water zongzi and 1 bamboo. Tube zongzi. Put plenty of honey on them, mind you. We'll pay you properly." Niu Wei, meanwhile, stood there dumbfounded. He hadn't even finished his polite formalities, and the clerk was already ordering food. The zongzi vendor, happy to have so many customers at once, took out the ash water zongzi for them. Then he retrieved 7 bamboo tubes, untied the strings, binding them, took a bamboo skewer, poked it into a small hole at the bottom of each tube, and pried the bamboo halves apart. Out popped a whole white log of sticky rice. Finally, using the skewer, he dipped each zongzi into a bamboo container filled with honey before handing them out one by one. Gulp. Watching the interesting preparation method, seeing the pure white, sticky rice drizzled with golden honey, Niu Wei couldn't resist any longer. He took a big bite. So good. Fragrant and sweet. After spending half the day wandering the market, Niu Wei and his men began looking for Da Shu, the commandery governor of Liuyang, to arrange some work for them. Given their status, there were many tasks they couldn't participate. And you yourself had put considerable thought into planning this. Sending them off to dig river channels as hard labor wasn't out of the question, but that kind of work required no skill, making it difficult to arrange contact between them and, the Jinwuwei guard agents. Ordinary manual labor held no appeal for the Xin Tribe. However, revealing overly important techniques was also unwise, lest it lead to nurturing a potential threat. Finally, after some deliberation, you decided to disperse the 100 or so men among various locations. Some were assigned to the newly established Baiju distillery in Liuyang Commandery, where they would participate in all stages of the spirit-making process. This arrangement was carefully considered. Firstly, the Han tribe's distilling techniques were still in their nascent stages, not yet fully matured, so letting them participate posed little risk. Secondly, distilling consumed vast amounts of manpower, resources, and time, especially grain. This placed a heavy burden on a state. History had seen numerous instances of restrictions on alcohol production. Alcohol is the essence of grain, as the saying goes, and it holds true. More alcohol means less grain, increasing the burden on the state. Your purpose in this arrangement was precisely to increase the burden on the Xin Tribe. Imagine if the customs and techniques of drinking and distilling could be spread to Bamboo Island. It would undoubtedly consume large amounts of their grain. Less grain would mean slower population growth and a likely reduction in livestock numbers. This, in turn, would curb the Xin Tribe's development. Moreover, alcohol is addictive. Others were assigned to help with farming, but only allowed to cultivate barley and wheat. Both grains were used in distilling and consumed in large quantities. However, the Han tribe's current yield per mu, a unit of land area, was relatively low, only around 300 jin, a unit of weight about 1.1 lbs or 0.5 kilar. Once they learned to grow barley and wheat, you wouldn't even need to make special arrangements. They would secretly hoard seeds themselves. When they eventually left, as long as the searches weren't overly strict, they could take the seeds with them. Even directly giving them some wouldn't be out of the question. Of course, when dealing with an enemy, or rather a competitor, your intentions were naturally not benevolent. However, this wasn't exactly a conspiracy. It was more of an overt strategy, digging a pit in plain sight and seeing if they'd jump in. Your plan wasn't just to teach the Xin Tribe how to distill and drink alcohol, but also how to eat wheat-based foods, noodle soup, drained noodles, flatbread, scallion pancakes, steamed buns, filled buns, dumplings, and so on. The goal was to make them thoroughly accustomed to wheat-based cuisine, and then teach them how to cultivate wheat and acquire the seeds. Thus, with distilling already consuming large amounts of grain, popularizing wheat-based foods and wheat cultivation among the Xin Tribe would compound the effect. Where 1 mu of land planted entirely with corn could yield 1,000 jin and feed 2 people, switching to wheat would not only extend the growing cycle, but also reduce the yield to 300 jin. It would then take 3 or 4 mu of land to feed just 1 person. This would drastically reduce the Xin Tribe's grain reserves. Furthermore, there were soybeans. Soybeans had been introduced from the Xin Tribe last year, but now you intended to give back by teaching them soybean oil pressing techniques, methods for making soy milk and tofu, providing peanut seeds, and various ways to prepare peanuts. The purpose, similar to promoting wheat, was to reduce the area dedicated to the Xin Tribe's staple food crops, encourage them to grow more supplementary crops, then devise various ways to consume those crops. For example, grow soybeans, press them for oil, investing significant labor, resources, and time only to get some soybean oil, which couldn't serve as a staple food. Naturally, the overall grain supply would decrease. by reducing the cultivation area of high-yield corn and converting existing farmland to low-yield wheat, barley, and non-staple crops like soybeans and peanuts, coupled with the grain consumption from distilling. Within 2 years, 70% of the Xin Tribe's population could lose their essential food supply. A sharp population decline wasn't necessarily the goal, but history has proven time and again that when the lowest strata of farmers lack food, there is only one outcome. They raise the poles and rise up in rebellion. Even if no one initiated a rebellion spontaneously, it wouldn't matter. You could dispatch Jinwuwei Guard undercover agents to take the lead, guiding the starving peasants to overthrow the existing Xin Tribe power structure. During this period, the Han Tribe would provide the rebels with various material support. Perhaps teach them sea fishing techniques, and then conveniently promote fast-growing, high-yield rice cultivation to fill their bellies again. Don't underestimate rice. While its yield might not surpass corn's, it isn't far behind. More importantly, rice is a refined grain, far superior to coarse grains like corn. In this way, the Han Tribe could gain both reputation and benefit, firmly winning the hearts of the common people on Bamboo Island, showing them that the Han Tribe was infinitely better than the original Xin Tribe leadership. At that point, you would make a powerful entrance, re-establish order, and if necessary, perhaps relocate the entire Bamboo Island population to the mainland, replacing them with your own people to thoroughly occupy the Xin Tribe's territory. You dubbed this plan the Gourmet Plan, using delicious food to burden and ultimately crush the Xin Tribe, paving the way for a Han Tribe takeover. The first part was an overt strategy, primarily focused on promoting cuisine, so resistance wouldn't be significant. After all, who could resist the temptation of Celestial Dynasty delicacies? The second part was a covert plot, but one in which the Han Tribe would have minimal direct involvement. Even if the Xin Tribe descended into chaotic warfare, it would have little impact on the Han Tribe. Aside from taking some time, the plan was nearly perfect. This top-secret plan was known only to you and Jin Yi. Even the Jinwuwei Guard agents preparing for infiltration knew only their own specific tasks and nothing else. Sometimes knowing less is safer. Niu Wei's 100 men were divided into several groups: distilling, wheat farming, oil pressing, soy milk grinding, tofu making. One group was assigned to the official porcelain kilns. Each group consisted of a dozen or so men, and embedded within each group were 1 or 2 Jinwuwei Guard undercover agents, living and working alongside them day in and day out, preparing for future infiltration. Once the initial activities for Niu Wei's contingent were arranged, the entire process of contact and infiltration was handed over to Jin Yi's management. You stepped back, only requiring Jin Yi to report on the situation every few days. You then went off to the newly constructed shipyard in Liuyang Commandery to provide some technical guidance. If the Han Tribe wanted to quickly intervene in southern affairs and even establish a city on the grasslands within 3 years, rapid transportation was essential. Currently, the only way to significantly boost transport capacity was through developing shipping. Among all modes of transport, shipping is renowned for its massive cargo capacity, surpassing even trains. In an era without trains on land, waterway shipping was arguably the most efficient and fastest means of transport. Furthermore, since most Han Tribe commanderies and counties were built along rivers, the advantages of boat transport were even greater. Arriving at the shipyard that day, you saw craftsmen studying the blueprints you had provided. Others were processing timber or constructing specialized shipbuilding facilities such as a steaming cage, Zhenglong. This was an extra-long facility for treating planks. Its main components were a boiler and a long, narrow steamer basket, up to 30 meters in length, capable of holding entire wooden planks. The purpose was to humidify the wood and use high temperatures to soften it, increasing its pliability. This allowed the wood to be bent into smoother curves, an essential step in processing hull planks. Of course, bending wood with fire was also possible, but that method was too slow to meet your requirements for shipbuilding speed. Moreover, since the Boats weren't enormous. They were easier to build in many respects. Firstly, material usage. A 20-meter-long boat required a main keel and planks exceeding 20 meters. Finding trees that tall might be difficult in modern times, necessitating many joints and splices. But here, towering trees over 20 meters tall were abundant. Consequently, many timbers were used whole, eliminating the need for splicing and saving considerable time and trouble. The main keel was relatively thick, running from bow to stern, the single largest keel timber. The bow section curved upwards, forming a smooth arc. However, bending this section couldn't be done solely by steaming. The wood had to be soaked first, then heated with fire, while various ropes and capstans were used to stretch and shape it, slowly coaxing it into the desired curve. This was the most time-consuming step. Additionally, numerous ribs also needed bending. Just crafting the keel components for a single boat took a full week, and this was only for a small vessel. On the day the keel was assembled, you were personally present to supervise. The long keel was set up in a shed by the river. This was the workshop, positioned for easy launching once the boat was completed. Otherwise, moving such a behemoth would be extremely difficult. Next came the installation of the ribs. Each rib was substantial. With the boat being 6 meters wide, the ribs were roughly that long. Without gantry cranes, lifting one required about 10 men. Some men lifted from the sides, while others directed from the middle, carefully aligning the tenon on the rib's center, with the mortise on the keel. Then, large, long-handled wooden mallets hammered them tightly together, ensuring a seamless fit. Finally, holes were drilled by hand at the joints, fish bladder glue was poured in, and wooden pegs were driven home, locking the two parts permanently. For a 20-meter inland sailing ship, ribs were placed every half-meter, totaling 40 ribs. Some were wider, some narrower, and their curves varied, but they had all been numbered and marked beforehand. Workers simply needed to install them sequentially, according to the blueprint specifications. Once all the ribs were installed and reinforced, 2 long planks were first nailed across the very top. This was done to fix the distance and angle of each rib. Then came the planking of the hull. However, the hull planking for this larger vessel differed from that of the previous small rowboats. Because it was bigger and had a keel, the planking was done in 2 layers, inner and outer. This served 2 purposes: better prevention of leaks through the hull bottom and increased buoyancy. The space between the inner and outer layers created an air pocket enhancing buoyancy, although this double-layer construction was primarily used on the bottom. The sides of the hull were mostly single-layered. More significantly, for large boats like this 20-meter vessel, the planks were fastened entirely with iron nails, very large iron nails. This made the shipyard the largest consumer of iron after weapons and tool manufacturing. The sheer quantity of nails, various connecting hooks, and different types of fasteners required for a single boat was immense, and this didn't even account for the possibility of mounting heavy weaponry on board. During the age of sail, a single third-rate ship of the line could consume tens of tons of iron. That was no exaggeration. Although, admittedly, they often included the weight of the iron cannons in the shipbuilding's iron consumption figures. Planking the hull progressed quite quickly, thanks to a division of labor resembling an assembly line. Workers at the lumber mill used windmill-powered gang saws to cut logs into planks. At the shipyard, specific workers were responsible for the softening process in the steaming cage. The rest were installers wielding hammers, whose only job was to nail the planks onto the keel framework. Broadly speaking, the shipbuilding process wasn't overly complicated. Lay the keel, plank the hull, essentially adding the skin, conduct sea trials, launching the bare hull to check for leaks, and finally, once everything checked out, begin the fitting out. Fitting out was akin to finishing a house. What went into the water was just a bare hull, equivalent to an unfinished house shell. The finishing work for a boat was substantial, including painting the interior and exterior, installing masts, sails, rigging, oars, adding necessary furniture, weapons, specialized equipment, and so forth. For instance, a fishing boat would require installation or modification for specialized fishing gear, and naturally couldn't lack nets and harpoons. A military vessel would be fitted with heavy crossbow artillery, or modified for dedicated Greek fire projectors, along with conversions for troop berthing and weapon storage. However, the Han tribe's first inland sailing ship wasn't that complex. It was just a standard transport vessel, also serving as an experimental prototype. Any problems discovered during sea trials could be corrected in subsequent new builds. Crafting the keel components took a week, assembling the keel took only a day, and planking the hull also took a week. Then came the waterproofing of the hull. The process was similar to building smaller boats previously, though with some changes. Previously, a mixture of deer antler glue and fish bladder glue, isinglass, combined with hair and hemp fibers, was used to create a thick paste-like filler. This paste was packed into the seams between planks using small trowels or wood chips, smoothed over, and finally painted. This time, there were slight modifications. Firstly, the issue of isinglass. Although the Han tribe now fished regularly, the demand from various carpentry projects was relentless. Carpenters nowadays relied almost entirely on glue and joinery rather than nails for woodworking. Therefore, to meet the shipyard's needs, you ordered the new tribe members in Liuyang Commandery to increase their fishing efforts, with the government funding the purchase of fish bladders. Secondly, the new waterproofing paste used large quantities of antelope horn and hide glue components to substitute for the limited supply of isinglass. Additionally, the hemp fibers were replaced with fine hemp rope. The tighter structure of rope, when mixed with the glue filler, was actually better suited for slightly larger vessels like this one. A larger ship displaces more water and experiences greater water pressure. Thus, waterproofing requirements varied depending on the size and type of boat, and craftsmen had to adapt accordingly, using shredded cloth and hemp rope mixed with glue to fill the plank seams, followed by a final smoothing layer of the older-style waterproofing paste. The hull was left to dry before painting could begin. Actually, there was another material far more suitable for hull waterproofing: bitumen. Unfortunately, it wasn't easily obtainable. The Han tribe currently lacked the means for artificial refining, and no natural bitumen deposits had been found. So, for now, it remained just an idea. After half a month, the bare hull was finally completed. The day had come for the wooden ship's official launch. The launch of the first sailing ship wasn't a public ceremony. Your stance was transparency without fanfare. No announcements were made, but anyone who happened to see it could watch. The officials simply didn't publicize it. After all, it was the maiden launch. If it sank shortly after hitting the water, it would be a major embarrassment. So keeping a low profile for now was prudent. You scheduled the launch for the afternoon, avoiding the morning rush when numerous traders docked at the wharf. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, in the shipyard by the river, the Han tribe's first inland sailing ship was launched. All support poles and props were removed. The large boat lay slanted on the muddy shore. Several small boats floated nearby on the river, with many people ready to assist from the water. You had arranged for the launch to be bow first towards the river, primarily to prevent potential capsizing. A large group of people pushed from the stern, while in the river, Ru and Hui Shan pulled with ropes. The 2 elephants had grown considerably over the years, reaching a height of 3 meters. They could easily walk in the shallows near the bank, and even swim directly across the river without issue. Despite their considerable weight, much of it was thick fat, acting like giant swimming rings that provided significant buoyancy. You stood on one of the small boats in the river, directing the elephants' actions, while the people on shore coordinated their efforts. After a concerted effort, everyone finally managed to slowly drag the wooden ship into the water, untying the ropes from the elephants. You were the first to jump aboard the new vessel. It had to be said, a 6-meter-wide ship was much more stable than a small boat. Your jump barely caused it to rock. Of course, you weren't the only one boarding. A large group of boatmen, all experienced rowers, followed. The hull currently lacked masts and sails, so propulsion still relied on sculling oars, essentially larger versions of regular oars. Oar locks were installed on the gunnels, allowing the oars to rest in them. This meant the person operating the oar didn't need to hold it with both hands for paddling. They could simply grip the end of the oar handle with one or two hands and move it up, down, forward, and backward to propel the boat. This wasn't difficult to learn for those accustomed to paddling with wooden oars. Many of the Han tribe's newly built small boats had already been retrofitted with oarlocks and sculling oars. This allowed boats that previously required several people to operate to be propelled by just one person, saving significant manpower in the shipping industry. After all, hiring an extra person meant paying an extra wage. Some individuals who rented boats for their own business could now row themselves. Though it was harder work, saving on wages meant earning more profit. Many praised this small improvement, which was essentially just another application of the lever principle. The waterway between Hanyang and Liuyang Commanderies, in particular, had a thriving shipping business. Over the past few months, boat traffic along this stretch reached hundreds of trips daily. Among those renting boats, some used them for their own cargo, while others operated transport services. Small vendors with limited goods didn't need to rent an entire boat. They could use these specialized transport boats, loading their cargo on board. The boatman would only depart once the boat was fully loaded. It was much like carpooling, but for boats, though generally slower than chartering a whole boat, as the boatman needed to collect enough cargo to make a profit. The boat rental business, controlled by Liuyang Commandery, had developed into a model similar to the rickshaw companies of the Republican era. The vehicles, boats, were the property of the company, Commandery, and the drivers, boatmen, paid rent to the company. Whatever the boatman earned beyond the rent was his own. Here in Hanyang City, they were all boatmen. 100 people boarded the newly launched large ship, each weighing over 100 jin. Their combined weight already exceeded 10,000 jin, incomparable to what a small boat could carry. Some people worked the sculling oars at the stern and along the sides, while others went down into the hold below deck holding oil lamps to check for leaks. You stood on the foredeck. There were no superstructures yet. The deck was completely bare. You had also designed it with a low freeboard, the gunnel less than a meter above the waterline. From a distance, it looked like a dense crowd of people standing in a giant wooden basin. This was the sight that greeted those on the shore. Many people noticed the spectacle and called their friends over to watch. Niu Wei, ever curious about the Han tribe, was naturally among the onlookers. Look, a big ship. Seems like it came from the new shipyard. Wow. Oh, that boat is huge. One of them is bigger than two of the old kind. No, 3. So that's, what the new shipyard is for. Soon the Liuyang River will probably be full of these big boats. The old boats could carry 30 people at most. This one could probably hold 200. Look, there are at least 50 or 60 people on it now, and it still looks spacious. The farmers, workers, and vendors standing on the bank commented on the new ship, marveling at its size and carrying capacity. As they chatted, they noticed Niu Wei and his accompanying clerk suddenly appear beside them. They proudly puffed out their chests. At this moment, they felt immense pride in being members of the Han tribe. In front of outsiders, mentioning their Han tribe identity gave them a sense of prestige, certain to evoke envy. Niu Wei exchanged greetings with some familiar vendors, but his eyes remained fixed on the large boat on the river. He had been living in Han tribe territory for nearly a month now, and had seen the bamboo rafts and wooden boats that frequently docked to sell goods. He had even paid for a ride on a small boat once. Initially, he had been impressed by the Han tribe's boat-building skills. He had seen rafts before, but this was the first time he had seen boats constructed by joining pieces of wood. However, at first, he hadn't given it much thought. Bamboo Island had freshwater streams, but its people weren't adept at water travel. Even for occasional use, a raft was sufficient. A small boat wouldn't be much more useful, because Bamboo Island was surrounded by the sea. Venturing out required something far more substantial than these small boats. They were practically useless for ocean travel. But the sight of this large ship before him made Niu Wei's heart pound. was the feeling of intense desire. This boat is so big. It can carry so many people at once, it must be able to hold a lot of cargo too, right? I wonder how much salt it could carry. A boat this large must surely be able to cross that strait. Safely, wouldn't it? If so, the Xin Tribe wouldn't have to wait for the low tide at the end of each month to travel back and forth to the mainland. If they built a dock, they could come and go whenever they pleased. Sir, Niu Wei suddenly asked the translating clerk beside him, could you ask Chief Han for me tomorrow if this kind of large boat can be sold to us, the Xin Tribe? If so, how many cattle, horses, and sheep would it cost? Niu Wei showed intense interest in the newly launched ship. The Xin Tribe, residing on an island surrounded by sea, had only one route to the mainland, accessible just one day each month. Currently, the Xin Tribe lacked neither people nor grain. They could smelt metal, practiced animal husbandry, ensuring a plentiful meat supply, and produced enough sea salt not only for their own needs, but also for trading with nomadic tribes, acquiring large numbers of cattle and horses to build their cavalry. In essence, the Xin Tribe faced no obstacles to development except for their limited territory. If they could acquire large ships like this one, they could travel frequently between Bamboo Island and the mainland, establishing colonies and expanding their territory. Even without such ambitions, simply using these large ships for transport and engaging in frequent trade with the mainland would be enough to make them incredibly wealthy. Yes, a large ship, albeit only 20 meters long. Well, I can ask for you, but I doubt it's likely, the translating clerk analyzed for Niu Wei. It's not just your Xin Tribe wanting this kind of large ship. Even our Han Tribe has only just built this one, haven't we? Besides, even if the chief agrees to sell it to you and you can afford it, you'd still have to wait until the Han Tribe has finished building enough for our own use. A ship this size takes a long time to build. Even if you placed an order, you'd probably have to wait several years. Also, the clerk added, this ship is huge. Even if we sold it to you right now, how would you get it back home? Niu Wei listened intently to the first part. The translator's points were all valid. Yet he felt unwilling to give up, believing that if the Han Tribe agreed to sell, he could definitely find a way to transport it. But the last question left Niu Wei stunned. He was right. How would they get such a large ship without wheels back home? It could only travel on water. On land, it was just a useless pile of firewood. The crucial question was there a direct waterway from Liuyang Commandery to Bamboo Island? Niu Wei's spirits instantly deflated. Never mind then, no need to ask. You're right. Even if Chief Han agreed to sell it to us, we couldn't take it away. Niu Wei looked dejected, but his fascination with the large ship remained. It was, after all, a product of Han Tribe advanced technology. Even just watching it from the shore was a pleasing. Soon on the river, the large ship moved slowly, propelled by sculling oars. Many craftsmen were inside the hull, holding oil lamps, inspecting for any signs of leaks. After about 2 hours of checks, no significant problems were found. All the craftsmen breathed a collective sigh of relief. No problems were good news. Repairs would cause further delays and complications. You, however, weren't particularly worried. During the ship's construction, you had visited the shipyard almost daily, personally overseeing the start of each new phase. With the chief himself supervising the project, no craftsman dared to slack off. They worked with utmost concentration. The only concern was that they might become lax later if you were no longer overseeing them directly. You considered implementing the Wulegongming system, literally, inscribe the artisan's name on the object. It was an effective method to prevent workers from slacking or being careless, a system historically used from the Warring States period right up to modern times for good reason. Before the Qin dynasty, Liu Wei had relied on Wulegongming to lay the foundation for Qin's eventual unification of the 6 states. In modern times, variations of this system continued to be used in various manufacturing industries. Essentially, it involved marking the finished product with the artisan's identity, making them accountable. In the Qin dynasty, for example, all Weapon components were inscribed or cast with the artisan's name or number. If a component failed inspection, the artisan could be punished. In modern times, the system has evolved, with production information often encoded in barcodes, but it's still possible to trace faulty batches back to the specific work teams responsible. The shipbuilding industry arguably preserves this system most completely. Even today, on ships constructed entirely of welded steel, welders stamp their identification number onto the seams they weld. If the ship later meets with an accident and sinks, and investigation reveals a faulty weld, the responsible welder can still be held accountable. While stamping steel wasn't feasible on these wooden ships, and the harsh punishments associated with Wuligongming seemed overly severe, you could adapt it. Instead of punishing the individual worker, hold the supervisor responsible. If a ship had problems, you wouldn't necessarily go after the worker, but the supervisor would definitely be held accountable. If the supervisor wasn't vigilant, how could the workers below be expected to perform well? Of course, to prevent supervisors from being caught in the middle, disliked by both management and workers, with workers potentially becoming defiant and deliberately ignoring instructions, supervisors needed to be granted certain authority. They needed the power to discipline uncooperative workers, ensuring compliance. This way, you could play the good cop. The unpleasant task of disciplining workers would fall to the supervisors. You could remain detached from the specific production details and workers. If something went wrong, you could simply deal with a supervisor, making an example of them. This would keep the working class compliant without directly antagonizing them, a rather advantageous setup. The large ship drifted on the river for a while. Once the checks confirmed everything was sound, you ordered it back. There was still much fitting out to be done, and time was limited. The ship sailed directly back to the shipyard's dedicated dock, where the entire fitting out process would take place. To achieve sufficient speed, you had designed the ship with 3 masts. The 2 main masts were positioned 8 meters and 14 meters from the bow, respectively, effectively dividing the ship's length into 3 roughly equal sections, with the EIMU section being slightly longer. A bowsprit extended diagonally from the bow, allowing for a triangular sail, jib, to be hoisted when needed, providing forward momentum even when sailing against the wind. It could also potentially serve as a ram, though the Han tribe currently had no naval enemies. Better safe than sorry. The 6-meter space between the 2 main masts was designated for the ship's superstructure. A cabin 6 meters long and wide could be built here. As the saying goes about Wu Peng Chuan, black canopied boats, what's a canopied boat without a canopy? Besides, this structure was necessary. Where else would the crew shelter from rain or sleep during voyages? However, for this first experimental vessel, also a prototype, you weren't going to settle for a makeshift awning. You had a 2-meter-high wooden house built directly on the deck. It had a flat roof, creating a platform above. Wooden stairs were installed on both sides, allowing crew members to climb up for observation, sail handling, or even mounting 4 large ballistae if needed. Each side also featured a row of 4 square windows, styled with paper-covered lattices like those used elsewhere. However, these windows slid open horizontally. Due to the ship's inherent motion, fixtures needed to be as secure as possible. Anything that could be fixed was made stationary. Construction of the superstructure proceeded quickly. Compared to shipbuilding, the craftsmen were clearly more adept at building square structures. Thus, Niu Wei, who made a habit of visiting the riverbank daily, witnessed this fascinating process unfold. The day after the initial trial launch, Niu Wei noticed that the shipbuilders had erected 3 very long poles on the ship, 2 standing vertically midship, and 1 slanted at the bow. He was puzzled, unable to understand the purpose of these poles. Didn't they just get in the way? He wasn't the only one confused. Even Han tribe members marveled at the sudden appearance of the poles, speculating amongst themselves about what new contraption the chief had devised. A day later, numerous craftsmen appeared, transporting large amounts of timber and planks onto the ship. With hammers banging away, They spent 3 or 4 days constructing a square upper cabin on the deck, complete with windows on both sides. The following day, workers began adding stairs and railings to the flat roof of the cabin, transforming it into an open-air platform. Over the next 2 days, workers were seen applying substances into the cracks of the cabin's wooden planks. Niu Wei couldn't decipher what they were doing. It looked like decoration, but somehow didn't seem like it. In reality, this was the waterproofing process for the superstructure, using the same methods applied to the hull below. Finally, just as the workers began painting the ship, a 4-wheeled carriage arrived from Liuyang Commandery and entered the shipyard. No one knew what it carried. Until the next morning, when traders from Huxin Island arrived in Liuyang Commandery for business, people noticed 2 small boats loaded with nothing but bundles of thin bamboo poles. These boats didn't dock at the trader's wharf but went directly to the shipyard's dock. What does the shipyard need so many bamboo poles for? Everyone wondered, including Niu Wei. The following day, they witnessed an even stranger sight. A group of craftsmen carried a large bundle onto the ship's central platform. From it, they unfurled a gigantic, what was it? A national flag? It looked enormous. Then the craftsmen inserted the bamboo poles from the dock one by one into sleeves within the flag, which appeared to be double-layered. Finally, as a nimble young man clambered up one of the tall poles like a monkey and attached hemp ropes, the onlookers watched as the craftsmen below hoisted the vertically rectangular flag, much like raising a national banner. It was a flag sail, entirely red, with a huge black character, Han, in the center, seemingly twice the size of the person. Horizontal lines ran across it. These were the bamboo poles inserted inside. Only then did many people suddenly understand. Oh, so those 2 poles are flag poles. But just as they thought this, someone noticed the ship was moving, slowly pulling away from the dock. Normally, a moving ship wouldn't be remarkable. The key difference was that they saw no one rowing at the sides. If no one was rowing, how was the ship moving? Good heavens, incredible. The chief has actually built a ship that moves by itself. Wow! Some people had previously grumbled about the new large ship, not for any reason other than its size. Rowing the smaller boats was already tiring. Operating such a large one, even if it carried more goods and people, would surely be even more exhausting. Now those holding that view felt thoroughly rebuked. Could someone as wise and almost godlike as the chief possibly overlook such an issue? Could he lack a solution? Impossible. The sails billowed. 2 giant sails, one white and one red, caught the wind and began pulling the ship forward. The triangular jib on the foremast hadn't been hoisted yet. You had only heard about jibs and didn't know the specific operating procedures. That would require experimentation later. At this point, the ship's fitting out was mostly complete. The next phase involved continuous sea trials to identify shortcomings and make gradual improvements. The ship's exterior was painted in 3 colors: red, black, and yellow. The hull was black. The area near the gunwale was bright red. The deckhouse above was black, but its windows were yellow, and the railings on the upper platform were red again. The masts retained their natural wood color, but were coated with tung oil, serving as a varnish. The deck below was treated similarly. The cargo hold below and the cabin walls above were painted white, primarily to enhance interior lighting. White walls always made spaces seem brighter. All the paints used were mixtures of tung oil and natural plant-based lacquers. Their purpose was not just aesthetic but primarily preservative, acting as a protective layer. After all, a ship couldn't be stored indoors or under a shed. Constantly exposed to water, sun, and rain, an unpainted vessel would likely suffer from moisture damage and mold, shortening its lifespan. Although painting incurred significant costs, the long-term benefits were considerable. On the shore, Niu Wei was utterly speechless, stunned by the beautiful large ship. Compared to the bare hull he had first seen, half a month of work had completely transformed it. It wasn't just more aesthetically pleasing, its functionality had been upgraded too. He still couldn't comprehend how such a large ship could move without oars. Could this be Han Tribe sorcery? Isn't Chief Han said to be a divine figure? Does he truly possess extraordinary powers? However, after listening to the discussions among the crowd, he learned the truth. Most Han Tribe members had seen windmills, which were common in their territory. Many had initially marveled at how those contraptions turned on their own, without oxen or horses. Later, explanations from older tribe members revealed they were powered by wind. Now, seeing the giant sails on the large ship, many sharp-witted individuals immediately understood their function. This is an inland sailing ship. It's propelled by wind. As long as there's wind, the ship can move on its own. When there's no wind, they use sculling oars for power. Those two big things hanging up there are sails. That's the name the chief gave them, the clerk explained to Niu Wei. Niu Wei was dumbfounded. Although he now knew it wasn't Chief Han's divine magic, he was still amazed by the chief's ingenuity. Using wind to move a large ship, how on earth did his mind conceive of that? Truly, a godlike figure. Niu Wei had lost count of how many times he'd come to the riverbank to watch the Han tribe's large sailing ship. He greatly enjoyed the atmosphere within the Han tribe. Compared to the Xin Tribe, whose origins were lost in time, the Han tribe felt much more vibrant. Every person in this tribe seemed to be living actively, calculating how much grain they could harvest this year, how much money that grain could fetch, and planning to have another child next year. The vendors, besides farming, used their spare time to diligently earn money. Sometime recently, many had discovered that no matter what small business they engaged in, they could easily make a profit. Consequently, more and more people joined the ranks of merchants. This didn't surprise you. The Han tribe now had a large population, and with population comes demand. The current market was wide open. As long as you had goods, finding buyers wasn't a problem. Naturally, anything would sell well. Of course, your support played a significant role, such as the popular snacks you introduced. The craftsmen led even more dynamic lives. For those in manufacturing, the greatest satisfaction wasn't necessarily the wages earned or titles gained, but seeing the things they personally created being put to use. It had been half a month since the first sailing ship completed its fitting out. During this time, the crew had been continuously conducting sea trials, firstly to test the new ship's performance, and secondly to train the crew in handling the sails. The smaller boats were quickly equipped onto the large ship, and the crew underwent corresponding training, including essential swimming practice. The shipyard itself remained busy. With the experience gained from successfully building the first sailing ship, subsequent progress accelerated significantly. The overall production line pace now allowed for one ship having materials prepared, one under construction, one undergoing sea trials, and one being fitted out, all simultaneously. With 4 ships at different stages proceeding concurrently, the speed was undeniable. New ships were launched almost weekly, like dumplings dropping into boiling water. The very first ship built was continuously used for recruiting and training crew members for various sailing disciplines, preparing personnel for the new ships to come. You even contemplated establishing a driving school for vehicles and boats, exclusively training adult students and issuing licenses. In the future, operating vehicles, no. Operating boats without the proper credentials would be prohibited. Upon reflection, it seemed quite feasible. Both driving carts and handling boats required considerable skill. Even if ordinary citizens saved up to buy one, being unable to operate it properly would be frustrating. Moreover, such a school could serve multiple purposes: building a reserve of skilled drivers and sailors for the tribe, generating revenue for the government through fees, and simplifying the process of conscripting drivers and sailors in the future. A quick check of household registration records would suffice. Just as the third large sailing ship began its fitting out, another convoy arrived from Hanyang City. Once again, they were delivering sails. The textile factory was located there, and currently, only Hanyang had the capacity to produce large sails. But that wasn't the crucial part. What mattered was that the people delivering the cargo this time were the Yu brothers, who had been idle for half a year. "Chief, you finally remembered us. Please give us a task quickly. I've been idle so long I feel like I'm about to grow mold." Yu Fu complained almost immediately upon seeing you. Since you decided to establish new commanderies in the spring, Yu Fu hadn't been allowed to continue his trading trips to the grasslands. Instead, he was kept home to assist with construction. However, neither he nor his brother was the type to sit idle contentedly. They had long been eager to embark on another long journey, but you seem to have deliberately forgotten them, assigning them no travel missions. "Oh, really? But I heard you've been doing quite well these past few months. Both your wives are pregnant again," you teased with a smile. Well, that's because I was idle, wasn't it? Nothing else to do." Yu Fu wore an embarrassed expression. Hey, your idleness is over. I summoned you both here because I have a mission for you," you said calmly. "What mission? Where are we going this time? Back to the grasslands? Just point the way, Chief. Yu Fu guarantees he'll get there and resolutely. Complete whatever task you assign. I won't turn back until the goal is achieved," Yu Fu pledged vehemently. Hey, it's not that serious. But this mission does carry some danger. "Do you know what cargo you escorted here?" you replied, sidestepping his question with one of your own. "What? Weren't they called sails, but those things looked huge. Some resembled national flags," Yu Fu answered honestly after a moment's thought, slightly confused by your question. Correct. They are sails for the newly built large ships. Let's not talk here, let's go aboard the ship," you said, beckoning them to follow. Oh. The brothers were slightly taken aback but quickly agreed. 15 minutes later, the three of you reached the riverbank and immediately saw a large sailing ship moored nearby. Its hull was predominantly black, accented with yellow and red paint on the gunnels and window railings, giving the entire vessel a striking appearance. The large ship's sails were furled. It sat motionless midstream. Many crew members were on the stern deck, practicing lowering and retrieving the landing craft, an essential skill for all sailors. Just then, another large ship returning from sail handling practice glided swiftly across the water and docked beside the shipyard's pier. This somewhat magical sight left Yu Fu and Yu Yi utterly dumbfounded. They uttered the same phrase everyone invariably said upon first seeing the sailing ships. "This ship moves by itself?"